Everybody, it's Carson Gordy, the Champagne Sports Anchor. We all know that Illinois football, they're going to be preseason top 15 next year. You look at all those preseason rankings from ESPN to CBS Sports to 24/7 to Joel Klatt of Fox. Illinois is a serious contender to make the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff. A lot of people say they could be this year's Indiana. That's kind of an insult because Indiana last year, they made the playoff after a 3-9 season. They had one of the weakest schedules in college football. This Illinois team is a little bit different. They bring back 16 starters. They won a Citrus Bowl over a really good South Carolina team. But I'll take a compliment when we get one for Illinois fans. But bottom line, the national media, they like Illinois a lot. And a big reason why is because they bring back 16 starters from last year's roster. That includes Luke Altmaier, a quarterback who could have left for the SEC. It includes Gabe Yakis, who could have left for the NFL or transferred to a big program. Xavier Scott, same situation. So Illinois, they built up a lot of goodwill with the national media. They're a proven product. And when Brett Bielema was going into this transfer portal season, he knows it's still vital. He knows he still needs to add players.
But it was definitely, I would say, a smaller number than last year.
In the month of May, they added 6 players, and none of them are big names. They're important, but they're not huge. Just for example, a couple years ago, Illinois was like, we need a quarterback after Tommy DeVito left, and they got Altmaier. They put all their eggs in the Altmaier basket. Or last year, I feel like Zachary Franklin was a big get for that Illinois football team. This year, Brett Bielema said it is more about building depth. It's about making a complete roster. Let's just kind of break down the players that are being added to Illinois just real quick. They added 2 offensive linemen. Tyler McMillian from Southeast Missouri State. He could play center or right tackle, projected. Another guy's a left tackle, potentially a backup player, Nathan Kapnick, who he's got relatives on the team, and he played at Valparaiso last year and had 34 starts. So these guys aren't big names, but in Big Ten play, offensive linemen and defensive linemen always get injured. You need to have depth because what's going to happen when J.C. Davis gets hurt? What's going to happen if Getsky gets hurt? You need to have that security blanket. Another guy they added was Carter Hewitt, a defensive lineman from Northern Iowa, 52 tackles, 6'5", 290 pounds. Illinois lost a lot of defensive linemen from last year. They lost Edwards and Briggs, and luckily they got those Wisconsin Badger transfer portal players with Kurt Neal and James Thompson. But again, you need a lot of depth in that area. 9 different Illinois defensive linemen had a tackle last year, so you can't just rely on 2 guys. We saw that a couple years ago when they only had Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph. Another 2 pieces that Illinois added were some special teams guys. I think we're potentially looking at our new starting punter with Lars Rao from Texas State. Played all 13 games last year. He seems like a potential replacement for Hugh Robertson, 31-year-old who entered the transfer portal. And then another guy, they got a kickoff specialist, Lucas Asada from North Carolina. 59 kickoffs, 39 of them were touchbacks. So I don't think any of these players are going to win the Heisman Trophy, but Brett Bielema knows 9 Big Ten games, playing Washington, playing Ohio State, playing Indiana. You need that depth. But clearly, the biggest addition for Illinois football was keeping Luke Altmaier. I kind of talked about it earlier. Altmaier just confirmed to an On3 reporter, Pete Nakos, a good national reporter, that there was potential attraction of leaving Illinois for an SEC program. 2 programs that come to mind that needed quarterbacks this year were Auburn and then Tennessee when they lost their quarterback Nico in the spring. Luke Altmaier really improved last year. 22 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. And I think one of the most vital parts about Luke Altmaier is that he's a great scrambler. And I think heading into this year, Luke Altmaier thought, this would be my 3rd year at Illinois. I know the offensive coordinator. Do I really want to start over at an SEC program? I mean, he's already at a top 15 college football team. What's the point of leaving for an Auburn team that's coming off a 6-7 season? I think Luke Altmaier's getting a pretty good situation coming back. It's not perfect, but it's good. He returns all 5 offensive linemen from last year. J.C. Davis, Getsky. These are really good guys. You saw that in the month of November. The offense started to hit that different level in the last month. They scored 38 points against Michigan State, Rutgers, and Northwestern in 3 straight weeks. Against South Carolina, they ran for 180 yards. This is an offensive line that's going to be able to protect Luke. He's potentially getting a really good tight end if Cole Russ can stay healthy. He's got 2 really good running backs with Aiden Lawfrey and Caden Fegan if he can stay healthy as well. The one question mark, and I'm just going to say it, is wide receiver. Pat Bryant's gone. Tied the school record for touchdowns in a season, single-handedly won you the Rutgers game. Played really good against Kansas. I mean, Illinois was a 9-3 football team. Who knows if they're 9-3 if they don't have Pat last year? Pat's off to the Denver Broncos, and I think he's going to do good. That guy's got the it factor. Everyone talks about Pat, but the one thing I've not heard a lot of people talk about, though, is losing Zachary Franklin, the fifth-year senior from Ole Miss and UTSA. I don't think a lot of people know that Franklin actually had more receptions than Pat last year. He had 55 receptions. If it was 3rd and 3, if it was 3rd and 4, if you needed that short-term or medium-term guy, it seemed like Zachary Franklin was always targeted. He had an amazing game against Kansas. He had a huge game against South Carolina. They probably don't win that game without Zachary Franklin. So those are two wide receivers who accounted for 50% of your receptions, yards, and touchdowns gone. Luckily, I think one guy for sure is going to be really good for Illinois, and that's Hudson Clement. Hudson Clement played at West Virginia last year, and he's got 2 years left of eligibility. Last year, he had 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. He seems tailor-made to take over from Zachary Franklin's position. If Altmaier needs a guy in 3rd and 5, I think Hudson's going to be the dude to get it done. And the coaching staff, they say that he can also be a deep threat. And I don't doubt that. I'm just saying that for sure. I think Luke's got a guy in medium situations in that security blanket. Who is going to replace, though, the home run threat of Pat Bryant? It's a big loss. You would hope that Malik Elzy finally steps up and has a good year. Malik Elzy is heading into his junior year. This was the 4-star from the state of Illinois that, Illinois won a pretty big recruiting battle, and a lot of people were really excited when they got him. Just bottom line, over 2 years, the production has been 9 catches. Malik Elzy has had 9 catches over the last 2 years. Has there been some development issues? Obviously, there's also been some health issues last year. I just hope with playing time and having this open vacuum that Malik Elzy, who is a phenomenal athlete, can finally break through for this Illinois roster. But if for whatever reason he doesn't have a good year or he doesn't develop, I think Illinois has a security blanket. His name's Justin Bowick. He's a transfer from Ball State. Didn't put up gaudy numbers, but he's 6'5". And he really impressed coaches during the practice over the spring. The wide receiver coach, Justin Stepp, compared him to Corden Sutton, pretty good former NFL player for the Denver Broncos. And Stepp actually coached him at SMU a few years back. That's the prototype. That's the comparison that Stepp's been giving. But I think regardless, Illinois obviously returning 16 starters, a big deal. I think the only big name that they really did lose is Josh McCray. Josh McCray, the Citrus Bowl MVP, who had a phenomenal relationship with Brett Bielema over the course of 3 or 4 years, he's gone. He's going to the Georgia Bulldogs, who's won 2 national championships since 2020. Even Brett Bielema said he was surprised that the Georgia Bulldogs scooped up Josh McCray, but McCray was a really good player last year. I think he led the team with 10 touchdowns, had over 600 yards, and he was just a big back. I mean, when it was need 1 or 2 yards, you give it to Josh. But I would just say in general, and I hate to say this about running backs, but a lot of times it's product of your environment. I don't care if you're Walter Payton. If you have a bunch of little kids trying to block a defensive line, a good defensive line, you're not going to get any yards. We saw that NFL comparison. Le'Veon Bell, #1 fantasy player every single year when he's on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He goes to New York Jets and he's irrelevant. So luckily, Illinois returns all 5 offensive linemen. When Aiden Lofty was healthy last year and down the end of the stretch, the guy was really fast and really good. 170 yards against Northwestern. He had a pretty good game against South Carolina in the bowl game. He's going to be A-okay, taking the mantle from Josh McCray. Caden Fegan is actually probably the guy with the highest ceiling, but the problem is he's been dealing with injuries over the last 2 years. Last year, he was the starter for the first 5 games. He's got great size, good pass catcher, sneaky speed, but he hurt his hip, and he had a hip injury and was out for the year. He did not practice over the spring, but we're hoping that he's going to be ready for fall play because he's just got great size for a Big Ten running back. Then another guy that a lot of people maybe forget about is Khalil Valentine. That's the 5'11" shifty running back who had some pretty big moments for Illinois last year. Brett Bielema says he's one of the key reasons why they won that Kansas game. Fourth quarter, they weren't running the ball. They put in Valentine, and he got 30 key yards, and they upset Kansas in week 2. one of the biggest ones of Brett Bielema's tenure. Just bottom line, even with McCray gone, I think they have enough horses to still have a pretty good running game. And just the big reason why, Brett Bielema didn't need to go crazy in the transfer portal is because he's the king of retention. We've been seeing this. When Randolph came back, and now this year he's got Gabe Yakis, who rejected the NFL and big-time college programs. He could be a first-round draft pick next year. Xavier Scott, National Defensive Player of the Week against the Kansas Jayhawks. He's back for another year. He's a great corner. He had 5 interceptions last year. J.C. Davis was granted next year because the NCAA dealing with all that stuff with junior college players and eligibility. They were just like, hey, we'll give you a blanket transfer. J.C. Davis can return for one more year. That is huge. Getting a big left tackle who was all Big Ten last year. Brett Bielema is one of my favorite personal stories that I've heard. It was December 23rd. J.C. Davis is watching a movie with his family in Oakland, California, and they hear the doorbell ring. And they're like, who is this? It's late at night. They look at the Ring doorbell camera, and it's Brett Bielema. Bielema left a day before Christmas, left his family, flew out to California to recruit J.C. Davis to come back for one more year and not go to the NFL. Guy's an absolute workhorse. The guy is an absolute animal when it comes to recruiting. Got to tip my hat to Brett there. And then finally, Luke Altmaier. Brett Bielema says he could have been a 6th-round pick. That was his grade. And Bielema was like, hey, we can juice that up. So getting a 5th-year guy, just look how much Luke improved from sophomore to junior year. He got benched sophomore year for John Paddock. People wanted him benched after the Penn State game when he had 5 turnovers, including 4 interceptions. He went from 13 touchdowns and 10 interceptions to 22 touchdowns and just 6. And I know he's losing Pat Bryant. I know he's losing Franklin, but I think there's enough returning pieces where he's going to be okay. Because Hank Beatty and Colin Dixon combined for 40 catches last year, and they're pretty good. He's going to get Cole Russ back this year from a torn ACL. Hopefully. That's a good tight end. He's got all of his offense linemen back. He's going to have a good running game. Luke's going to be fine. The passing game's going to be, it's going to be like Drew Brees and Purdue in the 2000s. Maybe not, but it's going to be good. And obviously everybody, we love Illinois football right now. They're going to be preseason top 15. They can make the college football playoff, but I think Brett Bielema wants the good times to keep on rolling. And nobody works harder in recruiting, high school recruiting, than Brett Bielema. And it's starting to pay off. Illinois historically, they are a mid-40 ranking kind of team. Like last year's recruiting class for 2025 was 45. Lovie Smith was usually in the 40s and 50s. According to 24/7 Sports, right now they are ranked 11th in the country. That's incredible. That would be the highest Illinois recruiting class since the Ron Zook era, which was almost 15, 20 years ago now. The big name they just got was Nazar Rakin, 5'11", 180 pounds. He's going to be a good wide receiver for Illinois. Could I see him potentially playing defensive back someday? I don't know. He's probably athletic. He could do it. But this guy is ranked as the 2nd best player in the state of Illinois. He had offers from Nebraska, USC, UCLA. Illinois is keeping these in-state kids now. Illinois is becoming a sexier brand with high school recruits, and it's obvious. They're starting to win more. That's obviously a big deal. When you go 9-3, that's going to be more attractive than if you go 4-8 like Lovie Smith. But number 2, Brett is sending guys to the NFL. Brett Bielema, since he's been at Illinois, he's had 14 draft picks. Lovie Smith had 4. So Brett Bielema is tripling him up. And the only Big Ten teams that are doing better than Illinois is Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. When you win and you send kids to the NFL, they're going to want a piece of Illinois. So I think Rankin's going to be a really good player for Illinois. He's a Morgan Park native, just like Ayo DeSumo. So Illinois is keeping that connection alive. And then Illinois also offered him a basketball roster spot. Brad Underwood said, sure, come on the team. And I think it's going to be exciting. This could be one of the most electrifying Illinois players that's ever stepped on this campus. Now, basketball, he's not super highly rated. His big offers were Northern Illinois and Eastern Illinois. He was a 5'11" point guard. But let's see it. Let's see if Brad Underwood can find some magic for him on the basketball court. Because football, for sure. Because in football, for sure, he's going to be a big piece of this Illinois football program. Basketball, I think it's going to be a super interesting dynamic. Two other guys that Illinois signed that are big names is a linebacker, Cam Thomas from Ohio. He's a three-star linebacker, and he's actually teammates with freshman Grant Bierman, who's also a linebacker on this Illinois team. So Illinois doing well in the Buckeye State, but definitely most of the recruiting is centralized in Florida and Illinois. And Illinois, obviously, they're 11th right now in 24/7 sports recruiting and a top-rated recruiting class and other metrics. And if Illinois wants to even get higher, I got two guys that they're going to want to sign, and they're recruiting hard. Two four-star Central Illinois tight ends, J.C. Anderson from Mount Zion and Max Sutter from Dunlap. That's a town near Peoria. Let's start off with J.C. Anderson. So obviously he's from Mount Zion, so he was teammates with current Illinois freshman wide receiver Braden Trimble, who the staff just absolutely loves the work ethic and speed and potential for this Illinois passing room. So JC, obviously one of his good friends, is playing for Illinois, and he's visited Champaign often. I saw him at several Illinois basketball games throughout the winter. He just visited Illinois earlier this spring. About 6 Illinois offensive coaches took out JC and his family out for food. So Illinois is recruiting him hard. But obviously, when you try to get a 4-star, there's going to be other suitors. This past weekend, he just visited Ole Miss. June 6th and 8th, he's going to visit Auburn. June 16th and 18th, he's going to be visiting North Carolina. Coached by former New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick. He had some pretty good tight ends in his day. But when I spoke to people that kind of know what's going on in the recruiting process nationally, Illinois, other states, I asked them about J.C. Anderson. The feedback that I got back is that Illinois is the front runner for J.C. Anderson, and Auburn is number 2. So obviously it's a long way to go with recruiting. I mean, when you got Lane Kiffin trying to get you, or you're trying to get Hugh Freeze or Bill Belichick, nothing's ever settled. A college head coach is always recruiting. Even if a player's committed to you, you're still recruiting him until he signs that letter of intent in December. So JC, it seems like Illinois got a really good shot for him, but they got to keep working hard. But this is the name I want to talk about. Max Sutter, tight end from Dunlap, ranked as the number 1 player in the state of Illinois. This tight end is a serious pass-catching threat, just like J.C. Anderson.
2026 in the state of Illinois is actually loaded, but also downstate. Yeah, I was in a basketball game last night that, I watched a young man play that I because of what I know and what I've seen, this kid will not only be a player in college, he'll play in the NFL.
And I mean, literally, all the big schools want him. Ohio State, heard of him? Just won a national title last year. He just visited them this past weekend. Alabama, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, Ole Miss. These are the bluest of blue programs that are trying to get Mac. If I had to say, I think Illinois is probably a lot more likely to get J.C. Anderson than Mac. But, I think the two are buddies. You saw them at a basketball game together, that Northwestern game earlier this year for basketball. They scheduled their official visits for Illinois on the same day, and they took pictures together and posted them on social media. I mean, they know how to rile up an Illinois crowd. They're good. And I'm telling you, if Brett Bielema gets 2 4-star Central Illinois tight ends, build him the statue. Build it outside of Greens Grove. I mean, talk about the clicks of having 2 pass-catching threats, for the quarterbacks of the future for Illinois. And this would just cement the recruiting class ranking. They're 11 right now. If they got both those guys, they would jump up top 10 for sure. We're going to continue to keep our eye on those 2 players. They're going to be huge names, probably the biggest names that Illinois is still targeting at this moment. They're going to go through their official visits, most likely Alabama, Penn State, Ole Miss, Texas, and then we'll probably get a better idea in the summer if they're going to commit to Illinois. But they don't sign their line on that dot until December. So recruiting never sleeps in college football. I'm Carson Gordy. Thank you for watching. I just want to give a quick update about what was going on with the newest news with Illinois football. I was kind of going through withdrawals, so I was kind of itching for a way to find to do a YouTube video. Pretty much bottom line, Illinois is giving me consensus top 15 ranking. They're college football playoff contender. They added 6 transfers in May, and most of them were backup players or special team players, and that's probably because Illinois got 16 returning starters and really good players. These are guys that could have left for big, big name programs like Gabe Yakis and Xavier Scott and Luke Altmaier. These are guys that could have left for the NFL a year early, but they decided to come back to Illinois. And this is going to be the highest rated Illinois team in a generation. And with high school recruiting, Illinois, they're doing really well, ranked 11th in the country right now, and they can even get it higher if they can land J.C. Anderson and Max Sutter. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm Carson Gordy. Take care. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to watch more videos from Fox Illinois.